Hello, and welcome to another NASSP webinar. My name is John Nori, and I'll be your moderator and host today. Today's topic is teen suicide and the school leader's response. The impact of suicide on the school community can be devastating. This webinar is designed for a discussion and information gathering and dissemination. Our presenter is Janice Case. She'll discuss the role of helping the community through the tragedy, collaborating for prevention, and working toward targeting those students whose struggles could go unnoticed. Resources from the recently launched website, www.grievingstudents.org, will be shared during this presentation, and we thank the New York Life Foundation for providing us access to that website. Today, if you're tweeting, we'd like you to use @NASSP, and the hashtag is NASSP webinar. Follow NASSP on Facebook at facebook.com/principals, and of course our website is nassp.org, and you'll be able to see this recorded version of this webinar at webinar videos. If you have technical problems, we ask you to call Rich at 703-860-7259. Without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Janice Case. We'll take a step here to do that and see if Janice can come on. Janice, are you an organizer now? Janice, are you there?
I'm here. Great.
Okay.
Are we all set?
Yes, we are.
Excellent. Good afternoon, everyone. It is absolutely a privilege to be here with you this afternoon, and let me just thank you up front for taking an hour out of what I know are really busy days to spend this time with us. As John said, we're going to be spending the time this afternoon really looking at the issue of teen suicide, but completely through the lens of the school leader. Having been a high school assistant principal, high school principal, and middle school principal, this is a subject that unfortunately is very familiar to me given my experiences, and I know that many of you on the line are probably here because you've had your own. We are, of course, in listen-only mode because of the number of attendees. However, very much a big part of today is going to be about you contributing to the conversation. So we're going to be spending time today, as John said, looking at some resources, but also really talking about your experiences and what we feel like are the areas that are lacking. What are the resources that are lacking for school leaders in order to better be prepared to lead a school community through suicide when it happens? How do we support our kids? How do we support our parents? How do we support one another? How do we support our staff? So I'm going to be asking lots of questions of you today. So this is going to be one of those webinars where I'm hoping everybody will stay focused. I won't get any of those little symbols that say you're off task or doing something else on your computer. And we're going to have to really use the technology. So to that end, and I'm going to put up, while we're talking, I'm going to move ahead a slide to show you our learning targets while I'm talking. John, I am trying to, oh, wait, hold on. Maybe that's going to allow me to do it. Let's see. Yeah, there we go. Okay, thank you. All right, so there are our learning targets for today. While you're reviewing those, you'll see again, as I said, there's going to be lots of opportunities to share. And when we do that, I'm going to have you doing that in one of two ways. Either raising your hand so that I can actually unmute you and ask you to speak so that the rest of the participants can hear, and or through the comment section of your, or the question box rather, of your control panel there. So when I ask for a response to something, having you type it there will be one way. Having you raise your hand to share out with everybody will be another. So you can see here that I'm going to provide a foundation. I've done that a bit. I'm going to do it a little more formally here in a moment. I'm going to ask you for your experiences, and I'm going to ask you to share a current practice in your school or district that you feel like would be beneficial for others to be aware of as we support one another in understanding our role here. I'm also going to ask you to identify some obstacles you face and brainstorm some solutions to those obstacles. And then finally, we're going to discuss the school leader's role beyond those headlines, explore some current resources, and identify components to additional resource that we might be able to contribute to. So it's a hefty agenda for today, but we're going to move through it, and we're going to have plenty of time for you to give input and to ask questions. All right. So our framework for the conversation, I'm going to start personally, and then I'm going to expand it to the larger national picture, if you will. So I'm here today, and I can to be quite frank with you, because of two particular students with whom I had the privilege of working with in the past as a high school principal. One of those students is Jeremy, and as I click on this link here, what you're going to see is that it leads us to a news story, and then I'm going to come right back to our PowerPoint. This is a news story that was one of many that ended up came as a result of Jeremy's death in our school community. And you can see here that the headline is, was the Falam kid a student or a victim of school bullying? So as we scroll down there, what I want to do is just kind of give you a picture of some of the things there and let you take a look at those. Jeremy was a kid he was one of those kids who shocked us all. And he has touched all of our lives forever in unfortunately the most terrible way because of the loss. And as a school leader, it was the first time that I was in a position to help my community begin to heal, whether from his parents to our kids to our staff, etc. And one of the biggest obstacles that I faced in all of that was the insistence based on social media, and our kids, frankly, need to categorize Jeremy's death, and they categorized it by calling it a reaction to or a response to bullying, and we won't go too far into that except to say that that was a big challenge for us because his closest friends countered that and vehemently disputed that he was not a victim of bullying, that this wasn't the reason. And likewise, his family didn't even want to acknowledge his death as a suicide despite the circumstances and the investigation from the police. So it was just such a challenging time for us, and we took away from it so many things that we learned, but so many things that we also felt so helpless to address. And that's part of why I'm here today, because I'm hoping to garner more information from you all and work toward a solution together as school leaders on how to address this with our communities. Now I'm going to see if I can come, oh, that's not what I wanted to do. Sorry, folks. Okay, let's see. Rich, you might be able to help me, or am I going back to my webinars? Sorry, I'm trying to get back to the actual PowerPoint visual here. Let's see if I can do that. Let's see, that's not it.
Janice, let me take control, put it back up, and then give you control back.
Thank you. So sorry for that, John, because we're going to be doing that again here in a second. I'm seeing where, okay, good, perfect, thank you. Okay.
And let me give you back control. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. Second to Jeremy was another student who had an equally profound effect on me as a school leader. This was Brandon. My last year at my high school, I was sitting at my desk one afternoon at 4 o'clock, and this young man walked into my office, a sophomore in our school. I knew Brandon because of all of his accomplishments. He was one of our well-accomplished students, great academically, involved in 3-sport athlete, involved in student leadership, all around great kid. And though we'd had one or two other quick conversations about school leadership type of things, we'd never had a conversation. In a school of 1,500 students, and many of you are familiar with that, you don't always have those in-depth conversations with every student, though you work hard to know every student. Brandon surprised me because he came into my office that day at around 4 p.m., sat down and asked to speak with me, and he slid a letter across the table to me and asked me to simply read it, and it was several pages long, and when I read it, what I came to understand is that Brandon had written about the previous weekend and the fact that he almost made an attempt on his life. And he came to me because he wanted me to support him in helping his parents. He wanted to tell his parents, he wanted me to tell his parents, and to work with them to determine where to go next with this information. He knew it was going to be shocking for them, and he felt like he needed my support to do that, which, as you can imagine, was something that I was just so grateful that he allowed me to play that role. Brandon didn't make an attempt on his life that weekend, and it was a peer, a friend, who literally saved him. Another young lady who, as you can imagine, I spent some time with after this, and that was a second piece of why I'm here today, because I became so caught up in these kids who we wouldn't expect, the ones who surprise us. As well as his friend, the peer who had to carry the weight of this young man's life on her shoulders for about 48 hours as she talked him through this without ever reaching out to an adult. So those are the things I carry to the table. In addition to all of that, of course, are the national statistics, and I want to make sure that we acknowledge those on suicide today. And so this next piece is about 2 minutes of a video clip that I'd like to share with you that just remind us where we stand today with teen suicide in our country. Now, as with video clips always, there's always an issue with sound, and so how the sound works might be a challenge. However, know that the most important thing are the words on the screen. The only thing that comes up in the background is music. What you see on the screen, the words you see on the screen are what's important. And we're going to give that a second to pop up here. Okay. And if for some reason, folks, it doesn't pop right up, obviously we're going to continue on.
Janice, I'm getting a message that says that YouTube is not responding, so
okay.
Let me see if I can't get anything to happen, we can move on.
Yep. And that's too bad. Folks, I will say that we did actually even practice this to make sure it worked, so that's unfortunate, but sometimes it happens.
I'm going to try once more.
Great.
Here it comes.
Okay, we have sound, but not a visual, John.
Yeah, I see that. I'm trying to get the visual back. Nope. I'm not getting both at the same time, so.
Okay, that's okay. Then we'll move forward. That's okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's lots of information, folks. We all know the statistics, and certainly teen suicide is an area of huge concern, and that's evidence, if by nothing else, than the number of folks we have joining us today on the call or on the webinar. And again, I thank you for that. And I do see actually a couple of hands up. So if you folks who have your hands up can give me just a moment, and I'm going to come to you all in just a moment. But what we do know is in our schools, it's happening every day that a school somewhere in our country, at least one if not more, are working through a suicide. And that in and of itself, as I said, is why we're here today. So let's start here. I'd like to share some experiences. As much as I'd love to get to everybody today, of course, we're not going to have the opportunity to talk with everyone today. But I would love to have 2 or 3 of you perhaps take just a minute to share something that's occurred in your community. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to think about these questions. Has your community experienced a teen suicide? If so, what obstacles did you face, and what skills or tools did you feel you were lacking as a school leader in that circumstance, in that moment? So I'm going to be quiet for about 30 seconds. Just think about that, please. And as you're thinking, if you would like to be somebody who would respond, who would share very briefly your experience, specifically focusing on the obstacles you faced and the tools or the skills you felt like were lacking, please go ahead and raise your hand in the window box, in the box there. All right, so as I said, if you're somebody who would like to share, could you please go ahead and raise your hand in the box there, and that'll give me the chance to call on you. Okay. All right, I think I have one hand raised, and Carolyn White, I think your hand was raised previously, so I'm not sure if you wanted to respond to this or not. So Carolyn, here's your chance. If you'd prefer not to respond to this question, go ahead and put that hand down. You just have to click on it again. If it stays there, I'll know that that means you'd like to talk, and I see Carolyn Bernard there as well. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute Carolyn White to give you the opportunity to share if you would. Carolyn, can you hear me?
Carolyn White, she's unmuting me. Don't unmute me.
Carolyn, would you like to be unmuted or would you prefer not to? Okay, Carolyn, I think, was not going to respond. So let's go to Carolyn Bernard. Hi, Carolyn.
Hey, Janice.
It's great to hear from you, folks. Everybody else, Carolyn and I actually are colleagues and friends, and I didn't realize she was going to be here today. But did you have something to share for us, Carolyn?
No, I'm sorry if I've interrupted. I was having trouble with the audio, so now I can hear you.
Now you're good. Great. No problem at all. I'm going to mute you again, Carolyn. Thank you.
Okay.
So here's what I'm getting in the input box from people typing things. So I'm going to share those. What I'm getting is that somebody had the experience, and the obstacle they focused on was controlling misinformation, especially with social media. And I hear you loud and clear on that. That's a bit of what we were handling with Jeremy's situation. So absolutely having some tools to use to address that is going to be a key piece. Secondly, I had someone say we had a suicide of a recent grad in college. The obstacles were finding the right language to discuss the situation without creating the risk of additional suicides. And anybody who's had this experience can absolutely relate to that. There's a fine line that we walk between celebrating a suicide and celebrating a student's life. And that is such a difficult point for us, and it's something that I absolutely want to be an outcome of the work that we're going to be doing in the future about this. How do we walk that fine line and help the parents, especially the families, celebrate this young life while also not making it look glamorous in a way that might cause additional students to go down that path. Janet from Idaho said we've had 2 suicides this year, 1 middle school student and 1 high school student. We face obstacles of misinformation on social media again, and that feeling of powerlessness to respond. And Janet, I'm going to use that comment to kind of put out there this notion that for me, one of my biggest obstacles was the political piece of this. We're under a lot of pressure from a lot of different angles about what we can say, what we can't say, and in the end, I felt like I couldn't say anything meaningful to my kids, and that was the scariest part for me, because at the end of the day, I wanted to make sure the rest of my kids were okay, and my hands were tied to do that in a way that I felt was meaningful, and that's part of why I'm doing this work. As an aside, Terry asked about slides for today's presentation. Yeah, Terry, the recording, actually, the entire recording, will be up on the NASSP website. Probably, I'm going to say look for them in the next week or so. That does come eventually, so you will be able to access those slides. So thank you for the folks who have made comments. I do have a few more I'm going to share. David says I've read different takes on talking about suicide. Is there research that shows after talking about suicide rates go up, or is that not true? David, that's a tough one, because my experience is that it depends on the school community. I think that for the most part, professionally speaking, the message to us is talking about it from a prevention standpoint. Being honest and opening the lines of communication before are the most critical piece. Talking about it after in a way that you can be honest and implore your kids to be a part of the solution is also very effective. So it's all about taking care in how we talk about it, absolutely. And then I had someone who said one obstacle was that the kids found out on their way to school. Again, that social media piece, sometimes it gets to them before we do. And again, people looking for safe language. Finally, parents wanting activities and events at the school that are not part of our protocol. That was another obstacle someone faced. Respecting the student and family versus what the school community needs to know. And also, I'm currently dealing with a suicide. My big concern is doing enough but not too much. And Joe, I certainly understand very much there, and I'm so sorry to hear about your most recent loss. And I think that at the end of the day, our gut does such a good job telling us what students need and how, and so following the gut in that front about what's too much and what's not enough, making sure that you take care of the kids who are with you right now is going to be an important piece. Now, I did have 2 other folks with hands up, Steve and Sherman. And again, I'm unsure right now about whether or not you all had your hands up for the purpose of sharing an experience or not, but I am going to go on to our next slide, and if you folks would still like to share when we get to the next part, just keep that hand up and I'm going to come back to you.
Janice, this is John. Before you go on, I just wanted to throw in a reminder about the grievingstudents.com website.
Yes,
because
and I'll be talking about that. Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so I just wanted to bring it back to your attention and make sure that the person who's currently dealing with a suicide knows that there are resources there that are free and easy to access, and you'll go into showing them that in a bit. Okay.
Thank you so much, Don. I do appreciate you saying that now, though, so that we make sure that that's heard loud and clear. We are going to wrap up today, folks, with some specific resources to use, and the grievingstudents.org that John just mentioned is absolutely. So Joe, the person who mentioned his current situation, you can go there right now and start to see some resources that are really going to support you all as you work through this. For now, I'd like to take a moment, and I'm going to be quiet for about a minute, and ask that you all, in 140 characters or less, yes, that's designed to be Twitter friendly. I'd like you to, if you're tweeting, if you're on Twitter, go to your Twitter account, pull it up and respond there. If you're not, please respond in our question box. But I'd like you to share one current practice that your school or district already does to address teenage suicide, whether it's prevention, whether it's a crisis plan that you have afterwards. What's one thing you already do to address suicide in your school community? And in your tweet, if you would include the handle at NASSP, the hashtag that John mentioned earlier, hashtag NASSP webinar, as well as my handle, I would appreciate that. And I'm going to give you 2 minutes to respond. I'm going to come back after be quiet for 2 minutes, share some of the things that I see as far as your responses go. 2 minutes, folks. Thank you. You're about halfway through your time. Take 10 seconds to wrap up. All right, so I'm going to share some things I'm seeing on Twitter as well as some things that I'm seeing in my comment box, and so many of you have added more obstacles. And please know, folks, that part of today is going to be about me capturing all of those obstacles and all of the practices you're talking about and beginning that work on this idea of what we can do to turn around and provide you all more resources as school leaders. So Terry shares that they provide an annual parent information evening where prevention and other mental health issues are addressed. Thank you, Terry. Sarah shares that they have a Signs of Suicide curriculum that they present to their 7th and 9th graders. Thank you for that, Sarah. Mark shared that my school includes an effective suicide awareness and prevention unit in all of our 9th grade health classes presented by one of our counselors. Excellent. Eric shared that they bring in speakers and have assemblies, referrals to mental health counselors, of course, as a process for that. On Twitter, I'm seeing that our middle school and high school counselors meet regularly with students who are at risk. And, of course, the middle school counselor also has a watch list. That's from @AveryTeach. We have, currently have a crisis counseling team consisting of the school and faith community with a manual on where to start in the event of a crisis. We have a local outside group. This is in the Seattle area that does professional development in this area for staff development in this. That's great, Larry, and I'm actually located here in the Seattle area. That's great to know. District-wide crisis management protocol, talking points for teachers in the classroom, and sample letters home to parents regarding the recent death of a student. Also self-care sheets actually posted on our website, also great. Lifelines curriculum, from the Hazleton Press. We have a district-wide crisis plan for our schools. We had a parent meeting last night to give parents information about teen grief, depression, websites, dark websites, and bullying, etc. We had churches, law enforcement, and schools represented. Great. Our school emphasizes cura personalis, care for the whole person, as a fundamental community value. It informs adults and students on how to look out for others. Anita shares we have a district response plan that helps to mitigate the situation with regard to steps, especially regarding communication to staff and students, etc. So many more folks there, and I'm looking at all of them, and so many outstanding things that you already do, which is just so powerful. So thank you for sharing all of those things. All right, so the great news is there are a lot of things out there that we're doing in our districts and in our schools to address suicide, and so many of those examples, as you saw, are suicide prevention. And you all have identified already some of the obstacles that you face. So I'm going to kind of skip through this slide because we've read through many of the obstacles you face. We talked about balancing the needs of the family, students, and staff. You've talked about the language, having the language to use that helps you walk that line between celebrating or acknowledging a loss but not celebrating the act of suicide itself. You've talked about so many other things there, so thank you for sharing all of those. The direction I want to take us now is really focusing on those students who scare us the most, right? Those ones who nobody expected. Not that we ever expect a student to take their life, but there are certainly those students who really just, when it happens, everybody's in shock because it's so unfathomable that it could have happened. And so I'm going to click here on this link, and this is going to take us to a news article. This news article comes from a school in the Northern Virginia area outside of D.C., which is where I spent most of my professional career, and which is why I'm so familiar with it. It's not my school, but a school in a neighboring district. Okay. We're going to try and figure out how to get past this. Let's see. I may not be able to get past this, right, John? That's what you're about to say?
I'm trying to say why. I don't know why that popped up.
Yeah, I don't know why it popped up either. Okay. So the school, and John, if you let me see if I can click back on the presentation this time, or if I need you to do that.
Okay.
There we go. Right?
Yep.
Okay, good. So, oh, this is going to take me to the current slide. So the school that article refers to is Woodson High School, and as I it is a school that is in the outskirts of Washington, D.C. and Fairfax County High School. And I brought it up because it is an example of a school community that was dealing with multiple suicides in a 3-year span, 6 to be specific. And in that span, the majority of those students being those students who really just completely shocked everyone. It just absolutely 100%, from families to friends to et cetera. Everyone so surprised. And so if you Google on your own Woodson High School suicides, you will find the article I was referring to, and you can certainly do that once we're done here. It hits home very powerfully how there seems to be that student who is missed. So, for example, when we go to some of the sites that I'm going to show you here in a minute that have really wonderful prevention programs, a common theme is that you're looking for signs, signs of depression, signs of self-injury, signs of, signs like has stopped participating in activities, etc. I'm talking now about the kids who don't show those signs, the ones who seem like they are going day to day as if everything is perfectly fine, and even their closest friends don't know that there's a problem. Those kids scare us, right, just like any kid who would take their own life, but these kids in particular scare us because the prevention programs don't seem to necessarily capture them. And so as I've done some work with some folks in that local area, one of the common themes, and you'll see that some references in the article, is this idea of empowering parents to better understand the pressure that our teens are under now and how it's so different than when we were in school and our parents' generation, et cetera. And it's so different because the level of competition just seems so much more daunting for our kids for a lot of reasons. And we won't spend time today debating those reasons, but for a lot of reasons. And so there's this new movement now in that Fairfax district outside of D.C. focusing on the idea of kind of balancing our competition talk, if you will, and talking to kids about from the perspective of being able to be happy while at the same time achieving the goals that you set for yourself and those types of things, and really trying to dissuade kids from a level of competition which will causes them more anxiety and stress than it causes them any other emotion. But it did bring to light, as I said, that a lot of our prevention programs really don't necessarily tag into those kids. And one of the pieces that's missing is the idea of empowering kids to respond to kids. Now, let me be very clear here right up front. I'm not talking about asking kids to play the role of my young lady with Brandon and be the support mechanism. The most important thing a student can do when they learn that they have a peer who is struggling with suicidal ideations is to get an adult involved, and that's always the truth. There's nothing more important rather than that. On the other hand, empowering kids, giving them the language in our prevention programs that will support them to understand that here's how you support a peer while you're getting an adult involved. And perhaps here's how we can all, students, parents, adults, better recognize those kids who are at risk because of their drive, because of the level of competition that they seem to be navigating within, if you will, etc. So those are the folks that we're going to be kind of really paying attention to. I call them the have-it-allers, that group of kids that seem to have it all and yet get to that dark point and risk their lives or sadly take their lives. Before we go into some of these other resources, any other thoughts? I see, for example, that Sherman has his hand raised, and Sherman, I know that you had that hand raised for a while, so I don't know if that's a new hand raise or if there's something you'd like to say. So, Sherman, if you are kind of in tune with me right now, if you'd go ahead and put that hand down, and if you do have a comment to make, go ahead and raise it again. That way I'll know that you want to speak. And if you don't do anything now, I'll assume that means the hand's just kind of stuck there. But any other thoughts or obstacles to share or things that you do that you'd like to talk about before we look at some of the resources that are already in place that you can use? And so as far as your comments in the question box go, anything else you'd like us to be thinking about as we're kind of considering this work we can do to better support school leaders, now's a great time to put a comment in that question box so that it's captured for us as we go back and look at this as a part of the research cycle. So now's a great time to do that. All right, I'm not seeing any change in Sherman's hand there, and I'm not seeing other hands raised. I want to make sure. I'm going to do one more check for you just to make sure. Okay. All right, I'm seeing Carolyn and Carolyn again, but again, I'm not sure if those weren't from earlier. So Carolyn Bernard and Carolyn White, if you have something you'd like to share, can you take that hand down and then pop it back up there so I know that it's a new hand for me? Okay, Carolyn Bernard's gone. Thank you, Carolyn. Carolyn White's not made a change, so again, I'm going to assume that hand is stuck there. A few more things that people have added as far as things they do. Include, here we go, some more folks who say they have outside agencies who come in and do anti-bullying as well as suicide prevention. Our school counselors and social workers offer presentations to 9th grade students about recognizing the signs of depression and suicidal ideation. We stress the importance of reaching out to a trusted adult. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. We have 2 nationally recognized assist trainers that work with teachers, coaches, staff, and the public to train in suicide prevention. We promote the National Suicide Awareness Week with posters, etc. Somebody noted MBI, that acronym. We show the video, It's Never Too Late, Stopping Teen Suicide, etc. So lots of, again, powerful resources that you're sharing there, and I appreciate that. And I think the idea to take away is reflecting on what we're doing now and what we can do additionally or different. Let's see, I did have a couple of questions. Let's see, someone who posed, my PTO wants to have a one school, one read initiative next year and have all students read the same book as well as staff and tie activities to this. The book they're looking at is Twisted. Is this a good idea? That's a powerful question, Karen, and I thank you for posing it. And it's difficult for me to say, obviously, as one person in this conversation, whether or not that's a good idea. I do think that's going to come more from your school community. I think it's powerful that your PTO wants to open the conversation to ensure that everybody's on the same page. That act in of itself, I'm going to 100% stand behind and say what a powerful thing to do as a school community. Identifying whether that is the right book will definitely take a lot of conversation there in your school. I think ultimately you're going to do what you always do, right? As a good school leader, you're going to say, what goal are we trying to achieve, or what problem are we trying to solve? Will this action, will this activity, will this book help us get there? So that would be my best guidance there. I also have some folks saying they work with teachers and teacher prep programs to share the information so the whole school can agree. Another question is it important to note this, is it rather important to note the sensitivity of the topic when discussing with students and parents? I'm sorry, that's a statement. It is, obviously. And Larry mentions too the importance of your counselors, and I couldn't agree with that more, Larry. This is a team effort. We're talking about it in the context of the school leader because that's our audience today, of course. But this is a team effort, and making sure that those folks that are most prepared and best trained to handle these pieces are going to be an important component. The school leader is our focus today because at the end of the day, you are the face of your school. But certainly making sure that the folks who have the best training to address some of the obstacles you're facing are in on the conversation and are a part of the solution is a key piece there. So let's go ahead and jump over to traditional resources. And again, these are great resources from the perspective of suicide prevention especially. So I'm going to click on just one, Suicide Awareness of Voices. I'm not choosing it because it's better than anything else, but because we can't look at all of them. So I'm going to give you this example, and the next page I'm going to look more at that grievingstudents.org page that John mentioned. So when you pull up this website, you're going to see a lot of resources, obviously, that really look at the education component of this. So I encourage you to go spend some time looking at their website. And again, it's called Suicide Awareness Voices of Education. And it's going to help you target all the different groups in your community, all your different resources. My encouragement to you, of course, is a big part of today is about starting the conversation. If the conversation hasn't been started, or if it's only started because you're reacting to a tragedy, now's the time to kind of put the brakes on and reflect and start the conversation from a proactive mode rather than a reactive mode. And then the grievingstudents.org is a really wonderful curriculum source. So I am going to take a moment to click on that website for you so that you can see it firsthand. The Coalition to Support Grieving Students is a powerful, they're a powerful resource right now, and you can see, even as we're sitting here, the screen changing and the different options they have. A big piece of what they have are the video and downloadable grief support modules for your school team. So if you're somebody who wasn't able to respond, that you have something in place already. If you were somebody who doesn't have something beyond, for example, a watch list or the opportunity for your counselors to speak to people who have been deemed as at risk, this would be a really wonderful place for you to start. When you come here, it's going to give you tools to help kids deal with grief, both because they've lost loved ones. Maybe you have somebody who's lost a parent or those types of things. As you can see, there are developmental and cultural considerations, so things that they're going to walk you through from that perspective. The practical considerations you can see there, etc. And then they have added recently the modules specifically to address the suicide piece. So there are going to be all those pieces for you there. I encourage you to go back to them. Again, that's grievingstudents.org, the Coalition to Support Grieving Students. And what I appreciate most about that is it's multifaceted. It is suicide, which is our topic for today, but it's also specifically addressing grief with students in general. It's a great place to send those counselors, by the way, that we were talking about. All right, so the missing link as I see it, and many of you have really verified or validated that today, is how we can come up with a resource, an experience. What it looks like has yet to be determined, but that will grab kids, that will empower kids, that will really rather speak to the ones who are hiding it. Those habit-allers that we talked about, an experience, a resource that can really reach out to them, because they do seem to be the ones most at risk because they're the least identifiable, if you will, the hardest to even understand. And for some of those kids, maybe not even understanding until it's too late that they have that dark thing happening for themselves. A resource that can empower kids to make a difference. Many of you may be familiar with PBIS, which is a system or a program, if you will, that we can integrate into schools to really get kids involved with being the solution to bullying, for example. So when we think about suicide prevention, how do we get kids to be a part of the solution? And again, without making kids responsible. The ultimate, always, the first thing we want a child to do is report to an adult, whether they're having suicidal ideations themselves or whether they have a peer or a loved one who has suggested they have suicidal ideations. We want the key always to be to get that adult to step in and assist. But in the meantime, how do we support them until that happens? Because the reality, folks, is we can say that all the time, and yet I can give you at least one concrete example where a student carried that on her shoulders for 48 hours, the life of a peer. And so I think about her, and I think about what resource could she have to be strong enough to get to that adult quicker, to get that support faster, and to be sure she's taking care of herself in that process. And again, convincing kids to partner with adults. That's what we're looking for. So as we're wrapping up the last couple of slides here, if you have thoughts about that, suggestions about that, throw them into that question box so that we can capture them so that as we move forward, we can keep all of those ideas in mind. While you're doing that, I will share one final website, and that's a website that's one of many. So I want you to be aware of that. But I actually came upon this notion, the ACT notion, last week at NASSP. For anybody who was at Ignite, I did learning labs on this to garner information from the folks there. And somebody shared this with me afterwards. It's the idea of supporting kids through the language of acknowledge, care, and tell. Three-pronged process. And so when you Google acknowledge, care, tell, you're going to come up with a ton of different resources that give you some of those. But this was an example of one that I came up with. And it's a way that a particular organization is promoting that idea with their kids to really, you know, when a peer says it, acknowledge it, demonstrate that you care, but telling is probably the most important thing that you're going to do. So I'll leave you with that as well as a resource to go back to and be thinking about as you're thinking about your next steps. So moving forward, speaking about those next steps, what we're strongly suggesting, of course, today is that you research some of the resources that have been provided here and learn more about suicide prevention in general, especially if you're not doing anything deliberate right now, folks, because I got to tell you, in the district I came from, in my last school where these things happened, we did have a suicide prevention program in place, and much like one of the comments that was posted, we had a program that was presented to kids in both the 7th grade and the 9th grade. So in the midst of their middle school craziness, right, and then in the 9th graders, they're launching into the most competitive part of their schooling and their K-12 experience. So it was a very solid program, which did not, of course, prevent all suicide. It certainly went a long way to giving kids tools and resources and all those wonderful things. So I implore you today that if you're not in a school or a district right now that at the very least has something like that, this is the time to start the conversation about that. So what will you do from this point? Starting the conversation in your district is the thing. Your voice is one of the most powerful things you have, and it's our great hope, of course, that after this talk today, you'll be more likely to make that step forward. And then finally, if you are interested in being a part of the conversation as we move forward, making some inroads into how to provide more support directed to school leaders, again, directed to you as the school leader. If you're interested in being a part of that conversation and feel like you have things that you can, ideas you can contribute, et cetera, or experiences that you've had that show the need, please respond by commenting in again, your question box today. Go ahead and put your name and your email, and again, we're going to capture all of that, and then at some point, as I'm continuing forward with that work and that conversation, we can certainly be in touch with you to be a part of that. I do have a lot of questions posted here, so as you're taking time to do exactly that, I'm going to read through some of the questions, and I'm going to, respond to the ones I can respond to. Certainly, John Norai from NASSP is on the phone. If there's anything John would like to add, he can certainly do that given his experience. And again, I'm constantly scrolling through the panel for raised hands. So if there's anybody who'd like to make a comment to the group, please raise your hand, and I'll try to get to as many as I can. But for now, Warman asked the question, can you share insight into the Natural Helpers Program? My understanding is that the program includes training peer contact points for students needing staff assistance with issues related to bullying, suicide, and stress. Warman, I'm thrilled that you shared that. I'm not familiar with the Natural Helpers Program. And part of this exploration today, too, is are there already some things out there, like you're mentioning, that might already be in place, that might work to solve these issues, that might support some of the pieces that we're talking about today. So I'm going to take a look at that because I'm not familiar. I am familiar with a similar program that's really targeted to bullying. So it's all about training kids to be among their peers in natural settings and to help thwart bullying, and to then, of course, get adults involved when necessary. So it's something similar to that, and I'm going to take a look at the one that you've offered here as well. I'm getting several folks who are giving me their contact information. Thank you. There are tons of teen suicide PSA videos on YouTube. That's absolutely correct, Charles. Thanks for sharing that. Charles asked me who you were looking for, the one I was looking for, right? Charles, I don't have the link right in front of me. At least I don't think I do, but I'm going to try and get it for you while we're all sitting here together. But I will say, Charles, if for some reason I can't quite get that to you in a timely manner in the next few minutes, know that you will be able to see this webinar again on the NASSP website here in the very near future, and that would be a good place to go to. Let's see, there we go. To go to look for it. Okay, so Charles, I will say that what I'm seeing in front of me is the PSA is simply called Teen Suicide PSA. That's the actual name of the video itself, Teen Suicide PSA. And the only other identifying criteria is that it's created by Sammy Brown and Tyler Atwood. So those are things to look at. Mark says that several years ago he sent his drama teacher to a national conference on using drama to investigate social issues. From that experience, she has developed 2 productions that address suicide awareness and prevention. Most recently, her production, The Bully Side Project, has been developed and shared throughout Michigan and around the country. It's empowered our students to take on this issue and be proactive. Mark, that's incredibly powerful. Thank you for sharing that experience. That's the kind of stuff I'm talking about, folks. That's the kind of stuff I'd like to harness and put together in resources that school leaders can use. There's never one magic bullet, right, to any of the issues we face. There's never one magic solution, but being able to compile a resource that school leaders can go to and find solutions and find the ones that best fit them is my end goal. And Mark just gave me a great example of that. It reminds me of something similar with my own drama program at my last school. They weren't addressing suicide and bullying. They were addressing the whole mean girl topic, if you will. And so they created a production, as you said, and then we went to the feeder middle schools to have the high school girls do a dramatic presentation about that idea. So same idea, Mark. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate it. Again, I'm getting lots of contacts, but I am scrolling down to see if there are any other questions or any other pieces that folks would like to add. Thank you for putting that forward, John. What role can or should promoting mindfulness play in helping our students develop positive mental health? Thank you for that, Mark. I appreciate that. That's such a powerful piece, right? It's such a powerful piece, that idea of mindfulness. And I think that it plays a big role in almost all of our conversations with kids, regardless of the topic, everything from academics to, as you said here, overall positive mental health. So I think that we can only, I don't think there's any such thing as impressing upon them that notion of mindfulness too much. Will the resources from the webinar be sent out, or will we need to go back to watch the webinar? I believe you will have to go back and watch the webinar, and if that's different, I'll ask John to jump in. I'm going to just note what's on the screen here, and I'm going to keep going through these questions and comments. This is going to be our way of wrapping up. But before I do that, I do want to make sure that you see on the screen in front of you, of course, save the date. Our Ignite 16 is going to be next February 25th through the 27th, 2016. We're going to be in Orlando. We just got back from San Diego from the 2015 version of Ignite, which was just an incredible professional learning experience. I was able to do 2 learning labs on grief there with folks, as well as some things on 10 leadership skills, all kinds of great stuff. There was tons in that, tons of resources there. So make sure you mark your calendars if you haven't already. So the next few minutes that we have left on the webinar, folks, is our Q&A portion, and I'm going to be using the questions posed in the question box here, and we're going to be responding to those. So that's how we're going to go about this. So if you have something you'd like us to respond to, I'll get to as many as I can, and hopefully that's going to help us wrap up. Have you ever dealt with, Carlin asked, have we ever dealt with schools who are dealing with a contagion of suicides? Any special resources for this? Carlin, that's a great question, and that article for Woodson High School is is one that I would direct you back to, because that certainly was considered a contagion. That idea of 6 suicides in just a couple of years was just crippling for that school community. And to my knowledge, there weren't any specific resources to address that. They certainly got, as you can imagine, there was a huge influx of resources from their district, from the community, etc. But they were things that were reactive to the set of circumstances, and so that is an angle to work on. What you do when you have those multiple suicides, that fear that somebody else mentioned earlier on, one of the other participants, that if you're not careful about your language, it can result in other kids making the decision to move forward with an attempt on their life, etc. All right, I'm continuing to look. Yes, okay. Barry also mentioned, you may have read the book The Overachievers by Alexander Robbins. I have. It is a great read. His question is, are schools contributing to an increase in suicide due to the policies and procedures that are currently in use, such as incredibly burdensome emphasis on testing? Barry, again, that's a political hot topic, isn't it? So I'm going to be very careful about distinguishing my response here and saying that I think it's challenging for us to say that any one particular component is a cause, obviously, and you nicely worded that as in contributing. I think that certainly the Woodson experience, and there are other schools out there like them, what the community came to find is they needed to acknowledge that the level of competition our kids are feeling, depending on the area or where they live and those types of things, can be overwhelming. And so if that is the environment they have to operate in, how we better help them understand how to balance those things. That idea, again, of balancing what's making you happy and what's also supporting your meeting your goals, and are your goals actually achievable, etc. So I would never, of course, go so far as to say that the incredibly burdensome emphasis on testing can be contributing to suicide. What I will say is we have to look at the whole package. We have to look at the whole set of expectations for our kids. Let's say 9, 12, especially because you get into those high school years and that's where that competition really kicks in. And we have to ask ourselves, what's really reasonable, and what, if anything, is starting to get us so much to the point that our kids just feel like it's just not doable. Now, I say all of that in the context that I am not a mental health expert, correct, right? I am a school leader like yourselves. That is where my degrees are. And so I think that there are other people who need to be a part of this conversation as well, and those are the people that I'm recruiting, people who have that counseling piece, that therapeutic piece, who can talk about how we help our kids find a sense of balance, and how we help our kids understand that that dark piece that comes upon them can be, or is not, insurmountable. It can be overcome. So those are the pieces that we're looking at. Joe also asked, what are reasonable responses to suicide in a middle school? How, as a leader, do you continue to say no to ideas? It's tricky, right, Joe? Because, you know, as much as we're talking today about trying to make sure we have resources targeted to you as school leaders, on the other hand, there's a gazillion out there. When you type in suicide prevention, there's just a lot of resources, and we have to be very careful about not throwing things at it, right? This isn't a topic where we want to just throw things at it and hope they stick and hope they solve the problem, and I'm using quote fingers that you can't see right now. What we know is the possibility of suicide will never go away. Our responsibility is to make sure that every day, every period, all day long, for every child, we're doing our best to help them maintain a positive mental health existence, if you will. That's what our goal is. And we can overdo it. You can overdo it by throwing a million different suicide prevention programs, if you will, at them. Instead, I suggest at the middle school level, you talk about it in the context with your school team there about what do our kids already know and what do we feel like they need to understand in order to be safe. That's the conversation. What do they already know, and what do they need to understand to be safe? And I think when you can answer those questions among your school team, you're going to come to the best decision about how to move forward with what to do with your middle schoolers. And I'm getting some comments about, folks, we have some youth speakers and youth leaders on the line. Thank you so much for being a part of this, and thank you for that information. I'll definitely be in touch with you. Mark asked if we could go back to one of the first questions today, and that is there research that indicates talking with students about suicide leads to suicide? I have a few parents that are convinced of it. So, Mark, I can say this. I've got your question, and I'm going to do some digging on that myself to ensure that I'm giving you the best possible answer. But I can tell you from my experience that I am not aware of any such research. In fact, what I'm aware of is that from a mental health perspective, talking about suicide frankly and in a way that helps students see that there are other ways is a powerful and positively impacting way of going about it. Lots of times when I have parents who say that they feel like research says ... or if I have staff, if I have anyone who says to me, a stakeholder who says, well, research says ... you should be doing this ... Oftentimes what I will do is very respectfully request that they bring that research to me. You know, it's that conversation of, I wasn't aware of that research. I would love to see that research. If you could bring it to me and we could have a conversation, I'd appreciate that because I want to do what's best for kids. And the way I do that is by including every voice, and your voice is powerful, so let me see the research to which you're referring. So that's my suggestion for you, Mark, is to go back with that in hand. I am going to do a little research my own on that topic because again it's not some I've not heard that before, so no, I don't believe that's the case, but I do think that I'm going to go back again to a comment a participant made earlier. A big part of it is the language we use. We do have to be so careful about how we talk about it to kids, especially understanding our audience, middle school, high school, the type of school, are you rural, are you suburban, are you urban, etc. All of those things have to be a factor in how we talk about it. I'm getting some other folks who are giving me their contact information. Thanks so much for all of that. I appreciate that, folks. At this point, I do feel like I have worked through all the questions that have been posed here at the bottom, although, of course, more are coming. We have about 5 minutes left. So as I see, I'm going to continue answering questions until our time is up. If there's another comment, another piece you'd like to share, please go ahead and raise your hand. You know, I'm like any school leader. I certainly can talk, but I'd love to hear some other voices as well. I've got a question about what are reasonable responses to suicide. Oh, we've already talked about that. Sorry. And we talked about that. Oh, good. We got those. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So it sounds like the protocol is good. Great. Awesome. Awesome. Okay. We have a school counselor on the line who appreciates that this conversation has been about school leaders. She's a school counselor. I'm thrilled, Allison, that you joined us and again, take away that idea that this is not a conversation for any one group, right? Any one title, if you will. It's a conversation for us to have as school teams. So thank you for that. I appreciate you being here. All right. And then I have... oh, that's excellent. An excellent question is, do I have any specific resources for Native American schools in dealing with suicide? Annette, I don't have them on hand. I can only imagine that there's some unique pieces, but I will say this. Go to that grievingstudents.org website, because as you'll recall, there is a module that has to do with understanding the cultural side of grief for students. So go there first and see what you find there, and feel free to leave your contact information with that question in the comments box, and I will do my best to get back to you, Annette. I appreciate that. Thank you for that.
Janice, if I could jump in for 1 second.
Please.
On March 19th, there'll be another webinar featuring Dr. David Schoenfeld from the grievingstudents.org work. And his topic is supporting students in schools in the aftermath of crisis. So there may be some cross-pollinating, and National Association of School Psychologists has been involved in that work as well. They may have some resources that we can track down for you on Native American students. So we'll work on that.
That's outstanding, John. Thank you for adding that. And I'm thrilled to hear that that piece about the webinar on the 19th. I think you're right. I'm going to encourage everybody who's here today to join us again on the 19th then, because and I'll plan on being, you know, on the line as a participant there, because I can't imagine that that's not going to help us continue the conversation. Outstanding. So I think I've exhausted all the questions in the question box, and we are at about 2 minutes before our end time. John, anything else to add from your perspective?
No, I just want to thank you very much. It's been a very interesting and lively discussion, and apologize for that one video not coming up, but I think we got the message about that piece. I just invite everyone to continue to watch our website for upcoming webinars and other work that Janice will be doing with NASSP.
Excellent. Thank you. Folks, again, taking an hour of your time is not easy to do. Thank you for that.